The Ascendancy of Nine Crowns had been conquering worlds for 11,000 years, and in all that time, it had never once had to explain itself. That was the first thing that people misunderstood about it. They imagined fleets, and there were fleets. They imagined guns the size of moons, and there were those too, dozing in the dark on their long elliptical patrols. But fleets were the smallest part of it. The Ascendancy's real weapon was a sentence, and the sentence was this: it was given freely. Every world the Ascendancy took, it took as a gift. That was the law. A world was besieged, bombarded, starved, broken open like a nut, and then at the end, when the last defense grid went dark and the last governor knelt on the last cracked plaza, that world gave itself to the Perennial Throne, and the gift was recorded, and the record was true because the record said it was true. Rebellion afterward was not war. It was ingratitude. It was a child snatching back a present. The Ascendancy did not fight rebels. It corrected them, the way a tutor corrects a spelling, patiently and with a rod. And every gift required a token. That was the custom, old as the throne, older maybe. When a world was given, the world sent an Ornament of Concord, one of its own, its finest, its cleverest, its most beloved, chosen by whatever remained of its authorities and carried up the gravity well in a white ship. The ornaments came to the perennial court and were kept there, and when the Ascendancy wanted to honor a servant, it honored them with an ornament, a gift of a gift, a person handed across a hall. Nobody in the court thought of it as slavery. That word did not survive translation into High Sarn. They thought of it as asterisk closure. The gift was completed, the circle sealed, and the conquered were woven into the conquerors, and everyone remained very calm about it for 11,000 years. Then a 23-year-old human said no. His name was Ilan Voss, and on the morning of the Seventh Laurel he had not slept, and the tailors could not make him stand still. They had built him a coat. That was the word he kept using in his head, built asterisk, not sewn, because the thing had a structure to it, ribs and struts, a load-bearing spine of alloy thread designed to hold up the weight of 7 laurels and their attendant sunbursts, ribbons and sworn tokens. It weighed 19 kilos. It fit like a cast on a limb that had never been broken. "You are fidgeting," said the Sarn tailor, whose 4 hands moved around Ilan's ribs with the bored precision of a woman diffusing a bomb she had diffused 10,000 times. "Champions do not fidget." "I'm not a champion. I'm a corporal who got promoted a lot." "You are the 7th laureate of the Perennial Throne," she said. "You are the first human to be so, and you are the youngest of any species in 410 years, and you are fidgeting." Ilan looked at himself in the tall mirror and did not recognize the young man in it. That was becoming a habit. He was 23. He had a face that his mother had called unfinished, and his sergeant had called asterisk lucky asterisk, and he had gray in his hair at the temples, which was new, and a scar under his jaw where a Kithran splinter round had gone in and out and taught him what his own blood tasted like. His hands did not shake. He had checked. He checked every morning, the way other men checked the time. 7 wars. He did not think of them as wars. He thought of them as 7 long corridors he had walked down and somehow walked out of. The siege of Paul, where he had been 18 and a rifleman and had spent 41 days in a drainage culvert. The Kithran break, where he had been 20 and had taken command of a company because everyone above him was dead, and had held a bridge that the Ascendancy's own doctrine said was unholdable, and had held it by doing 3 things the doctrine did not contain: the wound at Saravar, the long ice, the 2 suns, the nesting, and 6 months ago, the thing at Alam Gate, where a human boy with 11 ships had broken a fleet of 90 by doing the single most obvious thing in the galaxy, which nobody had done for 11,000 years because it was undignified. He had won them. That was the word the court used. The court loved the word. The Ascendancy had discovered humans about a decade earlier, the way you discover a wasp in a room, and had put them in the line, and the line had held in places where it had never held before. And after Alam Gate, the High Sarn had needed a new word for what the humans were doing, and had settled on winning asterisk, which was, in their language, a word borrowed from games. "They will present you with the laurel," said the tailor, tugging the coat straight. "Then the perennial will speak 11 words. Then the chamberlain will bring forward the ornament, and you will accept, and then there is a meal." Ilan turned his head. "The what?" The tailor's 4 hands went still. "The Ornament of Concord," she said. "The gift." "Nobody told me about a gift." "It is not a thing one is told about," she said, in the tone of a woman explaining that water is wet. "It is the honor. The laurel is metal. The ornament is the honor." "And it's what a statue, a stone?" The tailor looked at him for a long moment with her wide black eyes, and something moved behind them that he could not read, and would not be able to read until much later, when he understood how many people in that palace had spent their lives not saying things. "It is a person," she said, "from Vaal." Then she went back to work on the coat, and would not answer any more questions, and Ilan Voss stood in front of a mirror for a while with a strange cold thing opening in his chest, like a hatch onto vacuum. The Hall of Concord was 3 kilometers long, and they made him walk all of it. It was designed to do that to a person. Every empire builds one room whose only purpose is to make a body feel small, and the Ascendancy, having had 11,000 years to practice, had made one that could reduce a battleship to a moat. The ceiling was not visible. There was weather up there, an actual thin haze of cloud, and drifting through it, slow as thought, the hanging star charts of 900 conquered systems, each one a filament of light, each one a world that had given itself freely. On the floor between him and the throne stood 80,000 of the Ascendancy's finest. They did not applaud. Applause was a human thing, and the court found it alarming. Instead, as he passed, they turned their heads, one rank after another, a slow ripple of attention like wind moving over grain, and the sound they made was a low unified hum through the throat plates, and it went on and on and on, and it was the sound of an empire looking directly at him. Halfway down the hall he found Sergeant Halla when in the human delegation, a compact gray-haired woman who had been his crew chief for 4 of the 7 wars, and who had never once in her life called him anything but Voss asterisk. She was crying. She was furious about it. She gave him a small, violent nod, and he took it with him like a coin in his pocket all the rest of the way. At the foot of the throne he knelt. He had rehearsed it 11 times. Left knee, then right, then the head, hands loose at the sides so the court could see he carried no weapon, which was a joke, because the Ascendancy did not fear the weapon in a man's hand. It feared the one in his mouth. The Perennial spoke. Nobody ever really described the Perennial afterward. Ilan tried once, years later, and gave up. It was Sarn, or had been, 12 or 13 bodies ago, in the way that a river is water. It sat inside a lattice of gold and glass, and it was very old and very tired, and its voice came out of the walls rather than out of anything in particular. "You are the arm," said the Perennial. "You are the arm, and the arm is loved." 11 words in High Sarn. The whole hall bowed. And then the Lord Chamberlain came forward, and everything went wrong. His name was Vesic Carr, and he was the keeper of customs, and he was, Ilan realized much later, the single most dangerous being in the Ascendancy, because he was the only one who understood what the Ascendancy actually was. Not a fleet, not a throne, but a document, and he was its notary. He was old and small, and his 4 hands were folded, and he moved like a man walking through a library he had built himself. "By the Concord," said Vesic Carr, and his voice was mild and it carried 3 kilometers. "The world of Vaal was given to the throne in the year of the 9th Ascension, and with itself, Vaal gave its ornaments, as is the custom, as is the joy of the giver, and the throne which does not hoard bestows." He raised one hand. Down the length of the Hall of Concord, from a side door that Ilan had not noticed, a small procession came. 4 attendants in dove gray, And in the middle of them, walking, not led, not chained, walking, with her chin level and her hands at her sides, a woman. She was Enkoth. Ilan knew that much on sight because he had shipped with an Enkoth mechanic once at Saravar, and he knew the tall spare frame, the way the light caught on the fine ridge of bone that ran from the outer corner of the eye up into the hairline, the deep gray-green of the skin like the underside of a leaf. Her hair was cropped very short. She wore a white shift, ceremonial and cheap and deliberately plain, the way you dress a thing so that its value is understood to be intrinsic. She was somewhere in her middle 20s. There was a numeral inked on the inside of her left wrist, and it was faded, and it was old, and she had had it a long time. She stopped 4 paces from him. She looked at him. And here is the thing that Ilan Voss thought about for the rest of his life, on bad nights when the memory came around again. She was not afraid. That was what broke him. He had seen fear in every configuration a body can hold it. He had seen it in children and in generals. There was none in her. What was in her, instead, was asterisk calculation. A swift, cool, total appraisal, running over him from his boots to his stupid coat to his face. The way a pilot reads an instrument board in the first 2 seconds of an emergency. She was studying him. She was, though he did not know it yet, deciding how to use him. "Champion of the throne," said the Lord Chamberlain, "receive the joy of the conquered. Her name is Sirai. She is a wayfinder of Vaal of the house Nemrith, and she is the finest thing her world had, and her world gave her gladly." He inclined his head. "She is yours." The word came across the 4 paces of gold floor, and hit Ilan Voss in the chest. "Yours." And there it was, the whole thing. The whole 11,000 years of it, compressed into 2 syllables and handed to him like a set of keys. He became aware of several things at once, in the way you do in the first half-second of an ambush. He became aware that 80,000 beings were watching him, that the human delegation was watching him, and that 411 billion humans, on 9 worlds, in the great new bright unfolding of humanity's arrival on the galactic stage, were about to find out what he did next, and that everything they were about to be given, the shipyards, the seats, the lanes, the whole future was standing on this floor with him and could very easily fall down. He became aware of Halloween, somewhere behind him, holding her breath. He became aware that his knees hurt. And he became aware, with the perfect, terrible clarity that had kept him alive for 7 wars, that this was the exact instant, and that instants like this do not come around twice, and that whatever he was, whatever the culvert at Palt and the bridge at Kithra and the 11 ships at Alam Gate had actually been asterisk for, it was for now. He stood up. That alone was a scandal. One does not stand before the perennial without the word. "No," said Ilan Voss. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The Hall of Concord had been engineered over 11 millennia to carry a single voice from its floor to its invisible ceiling, so that the throne could be heard by all, and the acoustics did not care who was speaking. And so the word went up and out and across and into 80,000 skulls with perfect fidelity. The hum stopped. Ilan heard his own heartbeat. He heard the coat creak. He heard, very distinctly, 3 kilometers away, someone drop something made of glass. Vesikar blinked slowly with the second lid. "Champion," he said, "you are moved. It is a great honor. Perhaps you did not." "I understood you," said Ilan. His voice was doing something strange. It was very steady, and it did not feel like his. "You said she's mine. You said her world gave her gladly asterisk." He turned his head and looked at the woman in the white shift, and she looked back and her face gave him nothing at all. "Did they?" "The record," began the Chamberlain. "I'm not asking the record." Ilan's hands had opened at his sides. "I'm asking her." Somewhere out in the dark of that hall, 80,000 beings understood at the same time that something was happening that had no procedure. "That," said Vesikar, and now there was a small edge in the mildness, like a blade laid flat on a cushion. is not a question that is asked. Then I'll be the first. Ilan took a breath. He could feel the whole weight of the coat, all 19 kilos of it, all 7 laurels, and for the first time it did not feel like an honor. It felt like a bill. Sir, Lord Chamberlain, I've fought 7 wars for the throne. I've put men in the ground in 7 systems, and I've got the names of every one of them in my head, and I'll have them there when I die. I did that because I was told I was defending something. And now you want to pay me. Fine, pay me. Give me the medal, give me the ribbons. Give me a pension, give me a moon, give me a asterisk statue asterisk. His voice cracked and he let it. But you do not get to give me a person. Not on my watch, not in my hands, not with my name on the paperwork. She is an ornament of the Concord. She's a asterisk woman asterisk, said Ilan Voss, and she is standing right there and she can hear you. The silence that followed was the largest object in the room. Then in it, small and clear and unhurried, Vesic Carr said the sentence that would define everything that came after. He said it almost kindly. He said it the way a physician tells you the results. Champion, he said, the gift has been given, and in the Ascendancy of 9 Crowns a gift cannot be ungiven. He turned his head and looked at the woman called Sirai, and something passed across his old face that Ilan did not have the education to read yet. But he would soon, and he would understand that it had been a kind of arithmetic. It can only, said the Lord Chamberlain, be returned. And in the 4 paces of gold floor between them, for the first and only time in that entire vast hall, Sirai of House Nimrith closed her eyes. Not in fear. In the particular, bone-deep private despair of a woman watching 7 years of patient, brilliant, murderous work fall apart in front of her, because some idiot boy with a shiny coat had decided, in 11 seconds, to be asterisk good. They did not arrest him. That was the strange part. An empire that has not been contradicted in 11,000 years does not have a contradiction protocol. There was no cell for what Ilan Voss had just done. No form, no officer of the guard whose duty it was. So the Ascendancy did what all very old institutions do when something happens that is not in the book. It pretended, with enormous dignity, that nothing had happened at all. The Perennial withdrew. The lights came up. A functionary announced that the meal would proceed in the lesser concordance, and 80,000 beings filed out in perfect order and talked about absolutely nothing else for the next 9 hours. And Ilan Voss was escorted courteously by 4 attendants who would not meet his eyes to the residence that had been prepared for the 7th Laureate. It was on the 90th terrace of the palace, and it had a garden and a fountain, and 11 rooms he would never use, and a bed like a landing field. And it had her in it. She was standing at the long window with her back to the door when he came in, still in the white shift, her arms folded. The attendant set down a lacquered case, bowed and withdrew, and the door sealed with the soft finality of a wound closing. They put you here anyway, Ilan said. Of course they did. Her standard was flawless, unaccented, the product of a mind that had learned a language the way a locksmith learns a lock. She did not turn around. You refused the gift. You did not refuse it asterisk correctly asterisk. There is a form, 9 seals, 4 witnesses, a period of contemplation. Until it is filed, the gift stands, and the gift must be housed with its keeper. Now she turned and looked at him. Congratulations. You have made a magnificent speech and changed nothing, and I am still standing in your house. He had spent all afternoon assembling things to say. Every one of them evaporated. I'm not, he started. You're not, he stopped. He put a hand over his eyes, 19 kilos of coat. This isn't my house. It has your name on it. She crossed the room. She moved beautifully and economically, like a person who had spent years measuring exactly how much space she was permitted to take up, and had decided to take up all of it anyway. Tell me your name, your real one, not the one they say in the hall. Ilan Voss. How old are you, Ilan Voss? 23. Something happened in her face. It was not softening. It was worse than that. It was asterisk recalibration asterisk. The look of an engineer discovering the load-bearing beam is made of pine. 23, she repeated. 7 wars, they fed you into it at 16. 17. And nobody ever told you no. She said it flatly, without cruelty, as a finding. That is the only way this happens. A boy who has never lost, who thinks that when he says a true thing loudly in a large room, the room will bend. She sat down on the arm of a chair that cost more than the block he had grown up in. It does not bend, Voss. It closes. Then what was I supposed to do? It came out harder than he meant. Take you, say thank you, sign the receipt. Yes, said Sirai. You were supposed to say thank you and sign the receipt and take me up here, and then you were supposed to be a decent man in private, which is what the decent ones do, and it costs them nothing and it saves nobody. Her voice did not rise. That was the frightening thing about her. It never rose. And then on the 11th day, when the champion's seal was cut and pressed and delivered into your hand, as it is delivered to every laureate on the 11th day without exception, for 11,000 years, I was going to ask you to take me down to the Vault of Diadems, because a laureate may enter it once with his household to choose a token. And you would have said yes, because you are a decent man, and it is a small thing to ask, and you would have thought you were being kind. The room was very quiet. And then, she said, I would have taken back what belongs to my world, and I would have burned this empire down to the notary's desk. Ilan Voss stood in the doorway of his 11-room residence with a garden he would never use, and understood that he had walked into the middle of something enormous, and had, with the best will in the galaxy, kicked out one of its legs. 7 years, Sirai said. That is how long I have been in the tribute house. Do you know what an ornament does, Voss, while she waits to be given? She waits. She is fed. She is measured. She is taught the etiquette of a court that discusses her in the third person while she pours its wine. She looked at her own hands. And if she is very patient, and very quiet, and very good at being furniture, she learns where they keep things. You wanted to be given, he said slowly. You wanted to be given to me asterisk. I wanted to be given to a laureate, she corrected. Any laureate. I have been engineering it for 4 years, the placements, the visibility, the small demonstrations of my quality at the right dinners. I made myself the obvious ornament for the Seventh Laurel. A ghost of something crossed her mouth. It might have been humor. And then the Seventh Laurel turned out to be a human child with a conscience the size of a moon, and he stood up in the Hall of Concord and threw it in the fire. She told him the rest that night, sitting on the floor of the great useless room, because neither of them could stand the chairs. Vaal had not been given, that was the first thing. The Nkath had held out for 11 years. They had no fleet worth the name. They were traders, cartographers, a quiet spare people whose whole civilization was built around a single art, which was the reading of deep lanes, the folded roads between stars, the currents in the dark that most species crossed with brute engines and dumb math. The Nkath did not cross them. They read them. A wayfinder of Vaal could stand in a chart room and feel the shape of a lane the way a sailor feels weather, and their charts were not maps. They were instruments. They sang. Our charts are our contracts, she said. That is the thing no one outside Vaal ever understands. A lane is a promise. This way is true. This way will hold. I have walked it and I bind my name to it. So when we write a treaty, we write it as a chart. The clauses are lanes. The signatures are the resolution. When a true chart is read by a wayfinder, it asterisk closes asterisk. It resolves. It sings. She looked up at him. And a chart written under a false hand does not. It doesn't sing. It is dead in the mouth. She flexed her fingers. It is the one lie our people cannot tell. Vaal had fallen in the 4th year of the 9th ascension. The orbital cities had been cracked one at a time over 90 days. And at the end, the ascendancy had needed the one thing it always needed, the thing without which none of the rest was legal, the instrument of Concord, the gift. signed by the surrendering world in the surrendering world's own hand and form freely. They took my grandmother, said Sirai. She was the cantor of the deep chart, the last one. They took her into a room and they told her to write the instrument and she refused, and they put her in the room for 11 months, and at the end of it a chart came out with her name on it. Ilan did not say anything. It is in the vault of diadems, Sirai said. The instrument of Vaal, the first great chart of the Concord, the model for 400 that came after. They keep it under glass. It is beautiful Voss. It is the most beautiful object in this palace, and there is not a single being in this palace who can read it. Her voice finally moved one small fracture, quickly sealed. Because it is dead, because it does not sing. Because my grandmother, in 11 months in a room, wrote a chart with a false hand on purpose, and put a flaw in it that no Sarn eye could ever see, and every wayfinder born after her would hear in a heartbeat. The fountain ticked in the garden. You want to prove the surrender was forged, Ilan said. I want to read it aloud, said Sirai of House Nimrith, in front of the court, and let them hear the silence where the singing should be. And then, because she was a wayfinder, and wayfinders think in consequences, in the way a lane forks and forks again, she told him what that meant, and he felt the floor of the galaxy tilt. Because the instrument of Vaal was not just Vaal's, it was the asterisk model asterisk. 411 subsequent instruments had been drafted from its template, cited it as precedent, inherited its form. The entire legal architecture of the Concord, every gift, every ornament, every given freely, on every one of those 900 filaments of light drifting through the clouds of the hall, rested, at its base, on one chart in one case, under one pane of glass. If the first gift was a forgery, then there had never been a gift. There had only ever been a theft, 11,000 years long, that had been very carefully described. They'd kill you, Ilan said quietly. They will kill me anyway, she said it the way you note the time. That is what returned asterisk means. You heard the Chamberlain, a gift cannot be ungiven. It can be returned to the throne from which it came. And an ornament returned by a champion is an ornament found wanting. There is a house on the 11th terrace for those. Nobody comes out of it. She met his eyes, and there was no accusation in it at all, which was somehow far worse. You have 11 days, Voss. On the 11th day the refusal is filed, and I am returned. That is what your beautiful speech bought me. Ilan Voss got up and walked to the window, and stood there for a long time with his hands braced on the frame, looking out at the terraces of a palace that had eaten 900 worlds, and called it a birthday. He was 23 years old. He had held a bridge at Kithra that could not be held. He had done it by understanding a single thing that the Ascendancy's doctrine, in 11,000 years of magnificent scholarship, had never quite absorbed, that a structure is not strong where it is thick. It is strong where it is joined, and every structure, however vast, has one joint that is doing more work than it admits. He turned around. Then we don't file it, he said. Sir, I went very still. 11 days, said Ilan. The 11th day they cut the champion's seal and put it in my hand. You said it yourself, without exception, for 11,000 years. He came back and crouched down in front of her, and the ridiculous coat creaked, and he did not care. So I don't refuse correctly asterisk. I don't file, I stall. I be exactly the thing they think I am, a barbarian child who doesn't understand the forms and needs everything explained to him 9 times. He almost smiled. I'm very good at that. I've been doing it to Sarn officer since I was 17. And on the 11th day, I get the seal, and I take my household into the vault of diadems to choose a token. Sirai Nimrith looked at him for a long moment. You understand what you are saying, she said. If you walk into that vault with me, you are not a hero anymore. You are a thief and a traitor and the human who spat in the Concord's mouth. They will take the laurels. They may take your worlds. Do you know how new your species is? Do you know how thin your treaty is? 9 planets, Voss, 400 billion people, on a provisional charter. Yeah, he said, I know. Then why? And Ilan Voss, who had spent 7 years learning that the only honest answer to a question like that is a small one, said, "Because there's a woman on the floor of my apartment who's been given away like a coat, and I can't think about anything else. That's it. That's the whole reason. I'm not going to pretend it's bigger than it is." The silence stretched out. Then Sirai stood and crossed to the lacquered case the attendants had left, the one that held, she explained, the whole material property of an Ornament of Concord, 2 shifts, a comb, and the numeral card that recorded her 7 years. And she took out a thin sheet of chart film and a stylus, and she sat down at the great useless table, and she began to write. "What are you doing?" "Making it real." She did not look up. Her hand moved fast and sure, and the lines she drew were not letters, they were lanes. "You are a soldier. You think in loyalty, and loyalty is a rope you throw and hope somebody catches. I am a wayfinder. We do not throw ropes." The stylus turned, hooked, resolved. "We write the lane, and then both ships know where the other one will be." She wrote for 20 minutes. Ilan watched her do it and did not interrupt. Then she turned the film around and pushed it across the table. "It is a compact," she said, "in the form of my people. Read it. I will translate and you will listen, because if you sign a thing you cannot read, you have learned nothing today." He listened. It said, Sirai of House Nemrith and Ilan Voss of Earth bind themselves, each to each in a common lane. It said, neither is the property of the other in law, in custom, in fact, or in silence. It said, each may break this compact at any hour in any place without cause, without penalty, and without shame, and the other shall assist their going. It said, neither shall speak for the other, neither shall spend the other's life without the other's word. It said, what is done together, or it is not done. And at the bottom in the smallest hand, this chart is true, and when it is read it will sing. Ilan Voss read it 4 times. "You wrote a treaty," he said, "between the 2 of us." "I wrote the only kind of gift my people ever made." She held out the stylus. "One that both hands sign." He signed it, she signed under him. And then she folded the chart film once and did not give it to him. She put it inside her own shift, against her ribs, and Ilan understood exactly what that was, and did not object, and the not objecting was, in the end, the thing that made her trust him. 11 days, Sirai said. 11 days. Outside, in the garden he would never use, the fountain went on ticking through the dark, and up beyond the terraces the star charts of 900 conquered worlds turned slowly in the clouds of a hall 3 kilometers long, singing nothing at all. The Ascendancy's revenge over the next 11 days was not violence. It was hospitality. They buried him in it. There were fittings and processions and audiences. There was a rite of the 7 names in which a choir of Sarn children sang the 7 wars at him for 4 hours. There was a delegation of shipwrights who wanted to name a hull class after him. There was a banquet at which a marquis of the Outer Crown asked him, with exquisite politeness, whether it was true that humans buried their dead in the ground, in the actual ground, and Ilan said yes, and the marquis said, "How intimate," and drank something blue. And at every single one of these events, without exception, Sirai of House Nemrith was placed 1 step behind his left shoulder, in the white shift, and nobody spoke to her, and everybody looked. They were making a picture. He understood that by the 3rd day. The court had decided that the incident in the Hall of Concord had been a fit of barbarian nerves, and that the correct treatment was to simply keep going, to walk the boy through the shape of the thing until the shape closed around him. It was how the Ascendancy had absorbed 900 worlds, not by arguing, by continuing. So Ilan Voss played the barbarian. He was extremely good at it. He asked loud questions. He got the forms wrong on purpose. He asked the Office of Customs 3 separate times in writing for clarification on the difference between refusal return and declination with honor, and each time the office replied with a document of such crushing beauty and such total emptiness that he laughed out loud reading it. He requested a period of contemplation, which was his right. He requested a second period of contemplation, which was not, and which took 4 days to deny. And every night he came back up to the 90th terrace and sat on the floor with a woman who was mapping a vault. She worked in chart film. She would not use the palace systems for anything. Everything in this house has ears, and the ears are old and patient. So she drew from memory with a stylus, and what she drew was not a floor plan. "You keep making it a asterisk map asterisk," she said on the 4th night when he tried to sketch corridors. "It is not a map, it is a lane. A route is a sequence of conditions. Here the diadem stair, 3rd bend, there is a null field. It is fed from the terrace above through a conduit that runs outside the wall because 11,000 years ago they had no better way and nobody has been brave enough to touch it since. That is not a corridor. That is a asterisk current asterisk." She tapped the film. "Ask the right question. Not where is the door. Ask, what is this place afraid of?" He learned to ask. The vault of diadems, he learned, was afraid of exactly one thing, the theft of an asterisk record asterisk. Not gold. The Ascendancy had more gold than it had uses for. Not weapons. Records. Because the whole empire was a document and the vault was where the document lived. The instrument of Vaal lay in the 9th cell, under a pane of transparent diamond, in a null field that would stop a fusion torch and a mind alike. It had lain there for 4,000 years. Nobody had ever tried to take it, because nobody had ever wanted it, because it was, to every eye in the Ascendancy, an inert and priceless and utterly unreadable antique. "They think it is a trophy," Sirai said. "It is a asterisk confession." "Then we don't steal it." She looked up. "Think about it." He was pacing now, the way he paced before an assault, one hand rubbing the scar under his jaw. "If we take it out of the vault, it's stolen property. It's evidence with no chain, it's a asterisk human holding a Sarn relic, and every single thing you say afterward, they get to answer what the thief says." He stopped. "But if it never leaves the vault, then it cannot be read to the court. Unless the court comes to it." Sirai went very still, in the way she did when Elaine resolved. "The Assembly of Laurels," she said slowly. "What is it?" "It is the oldest court of the Ascendancy. It sits 9 times a year in the vault among the diadems because the law is kept there, and the law must be spoken where it is kept. Every laureate of the throne has a seat, and the perennial's voice presides, and the Lord Chamberlain is its notary." Her hands had gone flat on the table. "It sits on the 11th day of the Ascension month. It sits in asterisk 6 days." They looked at each other across a lacquered table on the 90th terrace. "The 7th laureate has a seat," Ilan said. "The 7th laureate has more than a seat." Sirai's voice had dropped. "Voss, when they give you the seal, they also give you the word." "The what?" "You have not read your own honors." It was almost a laugh, and there was despair in it and something else. "The unrefused word. A champion of 7 laurels may speak one thing to the throne that cannot be denied. 1. In his life. It is the oldest guarantee in the Concord because the throne is built on the arm and the arm must be loved or the arm may one day fold." Her eyes were bright and terrible. 4 beings in 11,000 years have held it. 3 used it for land. 1 used it to have a rival executed. Ilan Voss sat down very slowly. "So I can just," he stopped. His mouth was dry. "I can stand up in the assembly and say free her asterisk, and they have to." "Yes," said Sirai. "Then that's it, he was on his feet again. "That's it, that's the whole." "No." The word landed like a dropped weight. "Why no asterisk?" And Sirai of House Nemrith stood up and put both hands on the table and told him the truth, and it was the hardest thing anyone said to him in that entire 11 days. "Because I am not the asterisk point asterisk Voss." Her voice was low and shaking now, finally, for the first time. "There are 1,040 of us in the tribute house. There is a boy named Neth on the 4th floor who was 11 when they took him, and he is 14 now, and he pours wine at dinners where they discuss him in the third person. There are Kithrin and Alamite and Four and Koth, and a whole nation of the Sesh who exist in this palace as *decor*. She was breathing hard. You use your one unrefusable word on me, on *one woman*, because you like her face, because you feel guilty, and the custom survives. The vault survives. The forged chart survives. And in 9 months another laureate stands in that hall, and another girl walks up those 4 paces, and there is no one to say no because you already spent your no. On *me*. The fountain ticked. So no, sir, I said, you will not save me. You will not save me because I did not spend 7 years being furniture in order to be *saved*. She pushed the chart film across the table at him. You will do something much harder and much less flattering, and if you cannot do it then say so now and I will find another way, and I will not think less of you, and you will not owe me anything, because that is what the compact says. Ilan Voss picked up the film. Tell me what to do, he said. The tribute house was on the 11th terrace, and getting into it took him 2 days and the last of his reputation. He did it as the barbarian. He announced loudly at a reception that he wished to inspect his property's provenance, and used the phrase *quality assurance, and made a joke about receipts that made a countess laugh into her sleeve. And the Office of Customs, appalled and delighted, decided that the human was finally coming round, and issued the pass. Halloween came with him. He had found her on the 3rd day in the human delegations block, and she had punched him in the arm hard enough to bruise and then hugged him for 11 seconds and then said, "You colossal idiot," and then said, "What do you need?" The tribute house was clean. That was what he could never explain afterward to the people who wanted it to be a dungeon. It was clean and warm, and there were flowers in the windows, and the food was good, and the rooms were bright, and the 1,040 people who lived in it were healthy and well-dressed and quiet. They were so quiet. A steward showed them the dormitories. He was proud of them. He explained the schedule of instruction, etiquette, languages, music, the correct pouring of wine, and the medical program, which was excellent, and the fact that ornaments were never struck, never harmed, never insulted, and that any Sarn who harmed one would face the rope, and this was true, and he said it with real feeling. "They're not prisoners," Halla said quietly out of the side of her mouth. "That's the trick, isn't it? If you make the cage nice enough, nobody can point at the bars." Ilan met the boy. Neth, 14, all elbows, that Enkoth ridge of bone still soft at the temple, carrying a tray of glasses through a corridor. He stopped when he saw them and stood aside and lowered his eyes and waited perfectly for 4 seconds, the way he had been taught. Ilan crouched down. "Hey," he said, "what's your name?" The boy's eyes flicked up, panicked, then down. "Ornament 314 Champion." "That's not what I asked." Silence. The glasses trembled very slightly on the tray. "Neth," said the boy. "Neth," said Ilan Voss. "Okay, Neth. I'm going to remember that." And he walked out of the tribute house with his jaw so tight that Halloween, who had seen him after Kithra and after the long ice, put a hand on his back and did not take it off until they were in the lift. They came for Sirai on the 9th night. The Ascendancy did not have assassins. It had instead the quiet, a small and very old office, technically a subdivision of the Chamberlain's household, whose function was to remove problems that had not yet become facts. They were called hushmen and they were not soldiers, and that, in the end, was the mistake. 2 of them came up through the garden. They were good. They cut the fountain's feed so the sound would not change. They came in through the terrace door at the deepest hour, and they went straight to the sleeping alcove where the ornament slept, and they had between them a pressure sleeve, which kills without marking, which is how a returned gift is supposed to die. Quietly, of nothing. The alcove was empty. Sirai had not slept in it for 9 days. She had told Ilan on the second night that a wayfinder learns the current of a house, and this house's current ran wrong, and she slept in the pantry off the east passage instead, on the floor with a knife. She heard them anyway. She had been listening for 9 nights. What happened next took 11 seconds, and Ilan Voss only saw the end of it, coming out of the dark at a dead run with a chair leg in his hands, because he had no weapon in the residence, because a laureate does not need one. He saw the first Hushman on the floor, with his knee going the wrong way. He saw the second one turn, and he saw Sirai of House Nemrith already inside the turn, lo, her whole body committed, the shard knife she had carried for 7 years going in under the arm where the plating stopped, and he saw her face while she did it, and there was nothing on it. Nothing. She had been ready for this since she was 19 years old. Then it was over, and there were 2 bodies, and she was standing in the middle of the room breathing hard, and Ilan was standing in the doorway holding a chair leg like an idiot. "You are late," she said. Yeah, his heart was trying to leave his chest. Are you? They will send 4 next time. She wiped the knife on the dove-gray sleeve of a dead man with a steadiness that made him feel young, and then 8. The Chamberlain has stopped waiting for the 11th day. Then he knows. He knows asterisk something. She turned and looked at him, and her eyes were very bright in the dark. He knows the human is not folding, and Vesic Kar has been the notary of this empire for 400 years, Voss. He does not need to know what you are doing. He only needs to know that you are doing something, and to be certain that, whatever it is, it must not be allowed to be asterisk said out loud in the assembly asterisk. She crossed the room to him and stopped, and for the first time in 9 days, she reached out and took hold of the front of his shirt, not gently, and pulled him down until their foreheads were nearly touching. "Listen to me," Sirai said. 2 nights. On the 11th day they hand you the seal and the word in the vault of diadems, before the assembly, in front of the perennial's voice and 400 lords, and that is the only hour in 11,000 years when the chart and the court and a wayfinder and an unrefusable word will be in the same room. Her grip tightened. And Vesic Kar knows it too, so he will not kill me. He is finished with killing me. Killing me is a scandal, and scandals leave marks. Then what? He will make me not exist asterisk, she said. He will find the form. There is always a form. And in that room, when you stand up to speak your word, he will have arranged for there to be no one for you to speak it asterisk for asterisk. Ilan Voss looked down at the woman holding his shirt in her fist, at the 2 dead men on the floor of his beautiful, useless residence, at the fountain outside that had stopped ticking. "Then we change the word," he said. Sirai's hand did not move. "Say that again." "He's guarding the door I'm going to walk through." Ilan's voice was very quiet and very level, and it was the voice he had used on a bridge at Kithra with 11 men left. "So I don't walk through it. He thinks I'm going to ask them to free you. Everybody thinks that. It's the only thing a decent man would ask for, and they've all decided I'm decent." He straightened up, and she let go of his shirt, and something in her face had begun, very slowly, to change. "So let him build a wall in front of that. Let him build a beautiful wall, and I'll go somewhere else." "Where?" And Ilan Voss told her. And Sir of House Nemrith, who had spent 7 years as an object in an empire that had eaten her world and written a song about how gladly it was given, who had buried her grandmother's name in the back of her throat and never once let it out, who had planned and waited and poured wine and killed a man in her own kitchen an hour ago, sat down slowly on the floor of the 90th terrace and put her hands over her face. And laughed. It was the worst sound he had ever heard, and the best. "They will never see it," she said through her fingers. "Voss, Voss, they will asterisk never see it coming. It is not a thing that has ever been asked for. It is not a thing they have a asterisk word asterisk for." "No," he agreed, "but you do." She looked up at him, and her eyes were wet, and her mouth was hard. "Yes," said Sirai, "we do." On the 10th day, Vesic Kar made his move, and it was, like everything he did, beautiful. It arrived at the 90th terrace at dawn, carried by 6 of the Chamberlain's household in dove gray, and it was 1 page. By the hand of the Keeper of Customs, and under the seal of the Perennial Throne, the Ornament of Concord designated 329, called Sirai, being offered to the 7th Laureate in the Hall of Concord on the 1st day of the Ascension month, and being neither accepted nor declined according to the forms within the period of contemplation, is hereby found returned by non-acceptance, and is restored to the household of the throne, with thanks. Effective immediately. There was no arrest, there was no violence. There was a soft-voiced steward with a clipboard, and 4 attendants and a lift. Ilan Voss read the page twice, and then he read the last 2 words, asterisk with thanks, and he thought about being sick. "Don't," said Sirai. She was already standing. She had put on her sandals. She had, he realized, packed the lacquered case, 2 shifts, a comb, a numeral card sometime in the night, because she had known this was coming, because she had known it before he did, because she had spent 7 years learning exactly how this empire breathed. "If you fight them here, you are a laureate assaulting the Chamberlain's household inside the palace," she said, low and fast. "And by noon you are in the hollow, and there is no assembly and no word and no chart, and Neth pours wine for the rest of his life." She lifted the case. "Do not touch them. Do not raise your voice. Let me walk." "Sirai." "Let me walk, Voss." She walked. At the door she stopped and turned and looked back at him, 1 look, 3 seconds, no expression at all for the benefit of 6 witnesses. And then she was gone, and the door closed with the soft finality of a wound. He stood in 11 empty rooms for about 4 minutes. Then he broke the fountain. "So it's over," said Halloween. It was the 10th night. They were in the human delegations block, in a maintenance bay that smelled of ozone and coffee, because Halloween had spent 30 years learning which rooms in a hostile installation had no ears, and she had found this one in 9 hours. "It's not over." "Voss," she sat down on a crate, "listen to me like I'm your crew chief, because I am. They took her. They filed a form and they took her, and there is nothing in the paperwork of this entire galaxy that you can wave at them tomorrow, because they wrote the paperwork, son. That's the whole con. They wrote it and they've been editing it for 11,000 years. "I know." "There's a ship," Halla said it very quietly. "Ours, the Trellis Asterisk. Cargo run leaves in 6 hours, and the Ascendancy doesn't search human hulls yet because they haven't thought of it. I can get her out of that house. Me and 4 others. It's ugly and it's a coin flip, and about 1/3 of us don't come back." She looked up at him and her eyes were red. "And you go with her, and you 2 live. Some quiet rock out past the reach. And you live Ilan." The name landed hard. She had never used it before. Ilan Voss sat down on the deck plate across from her, and put his forearms on his knees, and for a while did not say anything at all. "She'd say no," he said finally. "She doesn't get a vote, she's in a... She gets every asterisk vote." His head came up. "That's the whole thing, Halla. That's the entire..." He stopped and pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes and started again. "There's a boy in that house, 14, pours wine. There's 1,040 of them, and every one of them has an asterisk name they only say when nobody's listening. And if I put her on that ship, I save 1 person and I leave the machine running. And she knew that on day 1. She knew it before I did. She's been saying it to me every night for 10 nights, and I keep..." He laughed wretchedly. "I keep trying to rescue her, and she keeps dismantling me." Halloween looked at him for a long time. 400 billion people," she said, "on a provisional charter. You know what the delegation's saying, Voss? They're saying you've cost us the shipyards. They're saying the Marquis of the Outer Crown hasn't returned a call in 6 days. They're saying the human seat is going to get asterisk reviewed." She spread her hands. "And they're right. This isn't just you. You do whatever you're planning tomorrow in front of the whole court, and it's not Ilan Voss they punish. It's Earth. Yeah, said Ilan. That's it, yeah. No, he stood up. And there was something in the way he did it that made Halloween, who had watched him stand up on a bridge at Kithra with 11 men and no air support, go very quiet. They put us in the line, he said. 7 wars. They spent us like water because we were cheap and we were new and we didn't know what we were worth. And now they want to hand us the shipyards and the lanes and a seat at the table, and all we have to do is walk past a house full of children on the 11th terrace and not look in the windows. He picked up his coat, the ridiculous coat, 19 kilos, 7 laurels. And if that's the price of the human seat, Halla, then I'd rather we didn't have one, because that's what everybody in that hall did on the way up. Every single one of those 900 worlds. They all walked past the window once, and they got something nice for it, and now they're all sitting in that court very quietly, not being able to look at each other. He shrugged the coat on. I'm 23. I've killed a lot of people for this empire. If I'm going to be able to stand being 24, I need tomorrow to happen. Halloween wiped her face with the back of her wrist. You colossal idiot, she said. Yeah. What do you need? What he needed was a clerk. His name was Tessic, and he was a sub-adjutant of the 3rd Register in the Office of Customs, and he had been copying forms for 140 years, and he was the single most bored being Ilan Voss had ever met. Ilan found him because of a footnote. Buried in the 4th of the 4 beautiful empty documents the office had sent him, in the smallest possible type, was a line about the procession of laurels, and the line had been drafted with a precision that the rest of the document conspicuously lacked, and there was an initial beside it. He went down to the 3rd Register at the 9th hour and put the document on the desk. You wrote this footnote. Tessic looked at it. Tessic looked at him. Tessic's second eyelid came down and went up. Champion, he said, I have written 600,000 footnotes. But you wrote this one. Ilan pulled a stool over and sat down, uninvited in a room where nobody had sat uninvited in a century. And you got it right. Everything else they sent me is fog. This is a joint asterisk. Somebody in this building still cares about how the thing is actually built, and I think it's you, and I need 11 minutes. The sub-adjutant of the 3rd Register set down his stylus. You are the human who said no, he said. Yes. In the hall. Yes. Tessic was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and went to a cabinet and pulled out a drawer that had not been opened in a very long time, and took from it a single sheet of chart film gone amber with age. My grandmother's world was given to the throne, he said, in the year of the 6th Ascension. She was a Sarn of the Kel Marches. We were not always the hand champion. We were the 3rd world the conquered ever ate, and we have been very useful ever since, and my family has been very proud. He laid the sheet on the desk. Ask your question. The Assembly of Laurels sits in the vault tomorrow. It does. Only laureates in their household may enter. That is correct. Ilan leaned forward. Then who carries the laurels? And Sub-Adjutant Tessic of the 3rd Register smiled, which, in a Sarn, is a slow, horrible thing involving too many small teeth, and which Ilan Voss would remember with enormous affection for the rest of his life. The bearers, said Tessic, 7, 1 to a laurel. They walk before the laureate into the vault and stand at his back while he sits. He tapped the amber film with one long finger. They are not household. They are not property. They are not anybody champion. That is the entire point of them. They are a function. And the laureate names them himself, on the morning by mouth, without countersign, and it has never in 11,000 years been questioned, because the bearers are furniture, and no one has ever checked the furniture. The silence in the 3rd Register was total. Can a bearer be an ornament of Concord? Ilan asked. "There is no form that says she cannot," said Tessic. "There is no form at all." He pushed the film across the desk. "That is what a footnote is, champion. It is the place where an empire forgot to look." They brought her out at dawn. Ilan Voss stood at the foot of the diadem stair in the coat with 7 laurels on it, and named his bearers by mouth, without countersign, to a steward with a clipboard, as the law required, and as no one had ever once cared about. He named Halloween. He named 4 sergeants of the human delegation, who had volunteered at 3 in the morning in a maintenance bay, and who were, all of them, terrified, and who all came. He named Sub-Adjutant Tessic of the 3rd Register, who arrived carrying his own stylus and looking 140 years old and about 9. And for the 7th Laurel, the Alamgate Laurel, the great one, the one they had made him a coat to carry, he named Sirai of House Nimrith, Ornament of Concord, 329, restored to the household of the throne with thanks. The steward wrote it down. That was all, that was the whole thing. The steward wrote it down because a bearer is a function, and a function does not require consent from anybody at all except the person doing it. And Sirai had sent word through Tessic, through a laundry chute, in a hand that made a lane on a scrap of film, and the lane had said, "Yes." They walked her down from the 11th terrace in the white shift with 2 of the quiet behind her, and she did not look at the quiet, and she did not look at the crowd. She looked at him. And Ilan Voss, standing there in 19 kilos of empire with his heart trying to come out of his mouth, understood what he was about to ask her to do, to walk into the vault of diadems in front of 400 lords, carrying the honors of the man they had given her to, as a servant, as a thing, as the exact shape of the exact insult that had started all of it. And he felt his face begin to come apart. She reached him, she stopped, she held out both hands for the cushion. "Sirai," he said very low, "you don't have to." "Voss," her voice was a thread, "do not you dare take this from me too." He looked at her. "They gave me to you," said Sirai of House Nimrith, "and you would not have me, and now I carry your laurel into their vault of my own choosing, and that, you idiot, is what a free woman looks like when she has decided how to spend her morning." Her hands did not shake. "Give it to me." He gave her the laurel. She lifted it, the Alamgate laurel, gold and heavy and stupid, and she set it against her ribs where the compact was, and she turned to face the great doors of the vault of diadems, and she stood at his back, 1 step behind his left shoulder, in the place they had put her a dozen times in 11 days. For the last time, the doors began to open. Beyond them, in a room 4,000 years old, under a ceiling of hanging crowns, 400 lords of the Ascendancy of 9 Crowns rose to their feet to honor the 7th laureate of the Perennial Throne. And on his left, in the shadow of the pillars, in an old body and a mild face, with his 4 hands folded, and his eyes on the woman in the white shift, the Lord Chamberlain Vesic Carr stood very, very still. The vault of diadems was not a room, it was a throat. It went down. That was the first shock. The floor of it lay 90 meters below the doors, and you entered on a gallery and descended a spiral stair of black stone worn into shallow bowls by 4,000 years of feet. And all the way down, on every side, in cells cut into the living rock and sealed behind panes of diamond, lay the asterisk record asterisk. The Concord, 900 worlds folded flat. Crowns hung from the ceiling on wires, actual crowns taken off actual heads. Nobody looked at them. The assembly of laurels sat in a ring at the bottom, on stone benches, 400 lords of the ascendancy in their orders and their colors, and above them, in a chair of no particular splendor, sat the voice of the perennial, a thin Sarn woman of enormous age who had spoken for the throne for 200 years and had, in that time, said perhaps 4,000 words. And in the 9th cell at the bottom of the stair, on a bier of white stone, under diamond, lay a sheet of chart film the color of old honey. Sirai of House Nemrith walked down 90 meters of stair with a golden laurel on a cushion in her hands, and did not look at it. She looked at the backs of her own fingers and breathed and counted, and did not look at it, because she had promised herself in a cold room at 19 years old that the first time she looked at her grandmother's hand, she would be able to speak, and if she looked now she would not be able to speak, and so she did not look, and the cost of that was the highest price she ever paid in her life. The seal was cut in front of them. That was the ceremony. A smith of the throne brought a blank of white metal and a die 4,000 years old, and pressed the champion's seal in the sight of the assembly, and it took 90 seconds, and the metal hissed, and then the Lord Chamberlain Vesikar took it up in two of his hands and turned to the seventh laureate of the Perennial Throne. "The arm is loved," he said. "The arm is loved," said 400 lords. He put it in Ilan's hand. It was warm. "And with the seal," said Vesikar, "the word, it is spoken here or it is kept. One word, champion to the throne, that cannot be refused." His old eyes were perfectly calm. "You may keep it, most do. It is a great comfort, they say, to have a thing that cannot be refused." And then, smoothly, without a pause, he turned to the assembly and did the thing he had come to do. "For the champion speaks or keeps," said the Lord Chamberlain. "The register notes for the ease of the assembly a small closed matter. The ornament designated 329, offered in the Hall of Concord and neither accepted nor declined within the forms, has been found returned by non-acceptance and restored to the household of the throne. She is no longer party to any suit, request, or word. She is closed." He inclined his head kindly at Ilan. "The assembly notes it. There is nothing left to ask." It was surgical. Ilan had to admire it even then. Vesikar had spent 400 years as the notary of an empire, and he had shut the only door in the room before anyone could reach for the handle, and he had done it in 9 seconds, and he had been courteous about it, and 400 lords let out a small breath of relief, because now the awkwardness was over, and the human boy could sit down. Ilan Voss stood up. "Champion," said Vesikar, and now there was iron under the mildness, "I have told you, she is closed. There is no word you can speak for her. There is no law under which she can be freed by your asking. That door is shut. "I know," said Ilan. He turned and looked up, at the voice of the perennial in her plain chair. "I'm not going to ask you to free her," he said. "She told me not to." The words went out into 90 meters of stone and came back strange. "She told me," Ilan said, "that if I spent my one unrefusable word on one woman because I liked her face and I felt guilty, then the custom would still stand, and the house on the 11th terrace would still be full, and in 9 months another girl would walk 4 paces across a gold floor and there'd be nobody left to say no because I'd have used mine up on her." He heard his own voice shaking and he let it shake. She was right. She's been right about everything from the first hour, and I have been a slow student, and I am sorry it took me 11 days. He lifted the seal. "So here's my word," said Ilan Voss, 23 years old, of Earth. "I don't ask you to free her. I don't ask you for a thing for me, or a thing for her, or a thing for anybody." He looked around the ring of 400 faces, and he raised his voice until it filled the throat of the vault. "I ask the throne to hear her." Nothing happened. For about 2 full seconds, 400 of the most sophisticated beings in the galaxy sat in absolute stillness, waiting for the rest of the sentence, and there was no rest of the sentence. "I ask that Sirai of House Nemrith be given the standing of a claimant before this assembly," said Ilan, "that she may speak, that she may bring evidence, that she may be answered, and that she be safe while she does it." He set the seal down on the stone in front of him, very carefully, the way you put down a weapon. "That's my word. That's all of it. That's what I want for 7 wars. And then he sat down. The noise that came out of the assembly of laurels was not a noise the vault had heard in 4,000 years. Vesikar moved fast for a being of his age. He was on his feet, 4 hands up. The word is void, it is not a boon, it is a asterisk procedure asterisk. The champion has been misled. An ornament is not a person in law. She cannot be a claimant, she cannot hold standing, she cannot. Is she alive? Said Ilan. The Chamberlain stopped. Is she alive? Ilan repeated. That's all standing is. Everything else you built on top of it. Ask her a question, watch her answer. Then tell this room she can't be heard asterisk. Champion. It cannot be refused. Ilan's voice cracked across the vault like a round going off. That's the deal. That's the oldest promise in your Concord, Lord Chamberlain. The arm is loved. And the arm's one word cannot be refused. And if it can asterisk be refused, then the arm was never loved. It was only ever used asterisk. And every soldier in every fleet of this empire is going to find that out this afternoon. And it was that, not the law, not the eloquence, but that last cold sentence, delivered flatly by a boy with 7 laurels who had 80 million veterans behind him, and a fleet at Alem Gate that still said his name. That made 400 lords of the Ascendancy turn, as one body, and look at the voice of the Perennial. The old woman in the plain chair sat for a long time. Then she said, in a voice like paper, "Let her speak." Sir of House Nemrith set down the laurel. She did it gently. She laid the cushion on the bench, and she straightened, and she stepped out from behind Ilan Voss's left shoulder into the open floor of the vault of diadems, in a white shift, with a numeral on her wrist, and 90 meters of empire above her head. "My name is Sirai," she said, "of the house Nemrith. My grandmother was Aviath Nemrith, cantor of the deep chart of the world of Vaal." She let the name sit in the air. "I have been in this palace for 7 years. Most of you have seen me. Some of you have handed me your coats." Nobody moved. "I am a wayfinder," she said. "I claim my evidence." "It is in the 9th cell." Vesikar said, "No." "The Assembly of Laurels sits in the vault," said Sub-Adjutant Tessic of the 3rd Register from the bearer's bench in a small dry voice that carried appallingly, "because the law must be spoken where it is kept asterisk. Evidence held in the vault is producible on the claim of a claimant. It is the 4th clause of the founding right. It has never been used." He blinked. "It has also never been repealed. I have copied it 900 times. The voice of the Perennial raised one finger. They opened the 9th cell. It took 4 attendants and 11 minutes, and the null field came down with a sound like a held breath let go, and they lifted the pane of diamond off the instrument of Vaal, and the air of the vault touched it for the first time in 4,000 years. Sir, I did not go to it. She turned her back on it, on her grandmother's hand, 3 meters away, after 7 years, and she faced the assembly, and she reached into the breast of her shift and took out a small folded square of chart film. "Before I read theirs," she said, "you must learn to hear." She unfolded it. "You have kept my people's charts in your vault for 4,000 years, and you have never once known what they are," said Sirai. "You think they are maps. You think they are pretty. They are asterisk contracts. A lane is a promise. I have walked this way. It is true. I bind my name to it. And a chart written by a free hand, when it is read by a wayfinder, resolves asterisk. It closes. It sings." She looked up. "And a chart written under a false hand does not. That is the one lie we cannot tell. It is the only thing we ever had, and it is why you had to make my grandmother write yours for you, and it is why you kept it." She held up the little square. "This is a compact," she said. "It is 11 days old. 2 people wrote it on the 90th terrace in this palace freely, and both hands signed. One of them is a human. It says that neither of them belongs to the other in law, in custom, in fact, or in silence, and that either may leave at any hour without cause and without shame, and the other will help them go." Her chin came up. "It is the smallest treaty in the galaxy. It concerns 2 people and nothing else. Listen to it." And Sura of House, Nemrith lifted her grandmother's art in her 2 hands, and read. "There is no word in standard for what a wayfinder does. It is not singing, although the court called it that afterward. It is not speech. She read the lanes off the film, and her voice went into them, and the film answered. The whole sheet lit from the inside, faint and gold, the way a wire lights, and the lanes closed asterisk, one into the next, and the closing made a sound, and the sound was not a sound. It was the feeling you get when a door you did not know was open finally shuts, and it went through 90 meters of stone and 400 bodies like water through sand. 400 lords of the Ascendancy of 9 Crowns sat in the vault of diadems and heard, for the first time in their lives, what a true agreement sounds like. Some of them wept. They did not know why. Nobody had ever told them. The light died. Sirai lowered the film. "That," she said, "is a gift." And she turned around and walked to the bier and stood over the instrument of Vaal. Ilan saw the hushman 2 seconds before he moved. He was on the gallery, dove-gray among the dove-gray attendants, and he had come down the stair, and he had a filament weapon in a fold of his sleeve, and he was 7 meters from her back, and Vesic Carr was not looking at him, which is how Ilan knew. There was no time to shout. Shouting would have stopped her. Neither shall spend the other's life without the other's word. She had written that. He had signed it. And at 3 in the morning in a maintenance bay, he had sent her one line through a laundry chute, and the line had said, "If it comes to it, do not stop reading. That is my word. Spend it." Ilan Voss came off the bench and crossed 4 meters of stone and put himself between the filament and her back. It went in under the ribs on the left side. He felt it as heat, and then as nothing, and then his legs stopped being an idea he had access to, and he went down on the black stone of the vault of diadems with a sound that was mostly surprise. Halloween hit the hushman like a freight sled. 4 sergeants of the human delegation hit him a half-second later. It was not elegant, and it did not need to be. And Sir of House Nemrith heard the noise behind her, heard him fall, heard the wet catch of his breath, knew the sound of a body going down because she had been hearing it since she was 19, and she closed her eyes for exactly 1 heartbeat. And she did not stop reading. She put her hands on the instrument of Vaal, and she lifted it, and she read her grandmother's chart aloud in the vault of diadems, while a human boy bled out on the stone 9 paces behind her, because he had told her to, because it was hers to spend, because that was what the compact said, and they had both signed it, and this was what it had been asterisk for asterisk. The instrument of Vaal was very beautiful. 4,000 years of Sarn scholars had said so. It was the most exquisite object in the palace. The great chart, the model of the conquered, the first free gift of a conquered world in the hand of Aviath Nemrith, cantor of the deep chart. Sirai read it from the first lane to the last. And it made no sound at all. Nothing lit, nothing closed. The lanes ran out and stopped and hung there, open-ended, going nowhere, 4,000 years of them. And the silence in the vault of diadems was so enormous that people put their hands over their ears. "Dead," said Sirai into it. Her voice was steady. It should not have been. Dead in the mouth. It was never signed. It was asterisk copied asterisk. It was made in a room by a woman who had been in that room for 11 months, and she wrote it with a false hand on purpose so that any child of my world could hear the lie in it, and she died 4 days after she finished it, and you put it under glass. She turned, and she held the great chart up over her head with both arms, and she looked at 400 lords of the Ascendancy of 9 Crowns. Vaal was not given, she said. Vaal was asterisk taken. And every instrument you have written since is drawn from this one, 411 of them, and I have copied their citations, and they all point here, to this sheet, to this room, to this lie. She let the silence do the rest. "You have no gifts," said Sirai of House Nemrith. "You never had a single one. You have 900 thefts and a very good notary. He did not die." That is worth saying plainly, because for 11 minutes it was an open question, and Halloween had both hands inside his coat and was swearing at him in 3 languages, and the voice of the perennial came down 90 meters of stair on her own feet, which she had not done in 200 years, and stood over a bleeding human boy and looked at him for a long time. Vesikar did not run. There was nowhere in the Ascendancy to run to. He stood in the ring of benches with his 4 hands folded, and when the voice finally asked him, he answered honestly, because he was, in his fashion, an honest being. "It was necessary," said the Lord Chamberlain. "The alternative was 11,000 years of war." He looked at the chart in Sirai's hands. "I would do it again. I only regret that we did it badly, that we left the confession in the vault because it was pretty." A small, exhausted movement of the head. Vanity. It is always vanity in the end. They took him away. He did not resist. Here is what fell. Not the Ascendancy. Empires do not fall in an afternoon, whatever the songs say. What fell was the asterisk sentence. It was given freely. Once 400 lords had stood in a stone throat and heard a chart make no sound. The sentence could not be said in the vault of diadems any more without somebody laughing, and an empire that cannot say its own founding sentence out loud has a very short number of years left to be an empire in. The instrument of Vaal was voided in 9 days. The 411 instruments drawn from it were open to challenge in 4 months, and by the end of the first year, 160 worlds had filed, and the court had to build a new hall to hold the filings, and there was not one word in High Sarn for what was happening, so they borrowed one. The tribute house on the 11th terrace was emptied on the 3rd day. 1,040 people walked out of it into daylight and stood in the terrace garden and did not know what to do with their hands. Ilan Voss watched it from a medical gurney because Halloween would not let him stand. A 14-year-old boy came across the grass and stopped in front of him and said, without being asked, in a voice that shook, "My name is Neth." "I know," said Ilan. "I remembered." The custom of the Ornament of Concord was struck from the register by the voice of the perennial in the 2nd month, in a session of 11 words, which is the traditional length, and the 11 words were reportedly chosen with great care, and nobody outside the room has ever agreed on the translation. The version the humans tell is, "We were given nothing. We must learn how to ask." They tried to give Ilan Voss an 8th laurel. He sent back the other 7. 14 months later, on a gray station out past the reach where nobody had ever heard of the Perennial Throne, and the coffee was terrible, a young man with a scar under his jaw and a newer one under his ribs was sitting on a cargo crate arguing with a mechanic about a burner coil when a woman came down the gangway. She had grown her hair out. She was wearing a wayfinder's coat, salt-stained, 4 years too big for her, and there was a delegation waiting for her back on Vaal, where the reconstruction of the deep chart was in its 9th month and going badly and would take the rest of her life. There was a seat with her name on it in a court that was slowly, painfully, learning a new grammar. There was a boy named Neth apprenticed to her, who could already read a 3-lane fork and was insufferable about it. She had, in short, an entire life, which she had built herself out of nothing, in an empire that had told her she was furniture. She stopped in front of the crate. "Voss, Sirai." They looked at each other. "I have read the compact 11 times, she said. "It is a good chart. It resolves." She put her hands in her pockets. "It says that either of us may leave at any hour without cause, without shame, and the other will help them go." "It does. It does not say anything about asterisk staying." Ilan Voss set down the burner coil. "No," he said. "It doesn't. That is a flaw." Sir F. House Nemrith took one step closer, and her chin was up and her voice was absolutely level, and only her hands in her pockets were not steady. "I have come to propose an amendment. It is a small one. It concerns 2 people and nothing else." She breathed out. "I am not given. I am not owed. Nobody sent me. There is no ceremony and no hall and no witnesses and nothing whatsoever in it for either of us but the thing itself." A pause. "I am asking." An empire 11,000 years old had once presented this woman to him on a gold floor, in a white shift, in front of 80,000 beings, and called it the greatest honor in the galaxy. They had been wrong about almost everything. But they had been wrong about that most of all, because a thing that is handed to you is only ever worth what the hand thought of you, and nothing in creation is worth anything at all until it is chosen freely by someone who could just as easily have walked away, and did not. Ilan Voss looked up at her, 24 years old, 7 wars, no laurels. Yes, he said. And that not the throne, not the vault, not the 7 wars was the only gift he ever accepted, and it was given by the only being in the galaxy with the standing to give it, herself.